Hi, my name is Paul. Thanks for checking out my new DIY channel. In this video, I wanted to go over the installation of a 200 amp Square D subpanel off of a 200 amp Square D main panel. So to start with, let me mention that I am not an electrician. I have done a bunch of DIY electrical projects, maybe around 30 or so in this house. And I haven't found something exactly, similar to this installation, so I wanted to share it and also document it for myself. So the reason I decided to add an extra sub panel in my house is because my main sub panel is really small and it's running out of space. I wanted to clean up the existing main panel and move some of the circuits here. And I also have a lot of extra plans to add electrical appliances, including some split level ACs and maybe some solar. Okay, so let me go over some of the details of my installation so you can see if it's relevant to what you're trying to do. So I'm going to connect this 200 amp Square D sub panel off of another 200 amp Square D main panel. So as you can see, I already have some of the project started. What I did thus far is do some of the framing that I'm going to use to house the sub panel and possibly another sub panel in the future. That's why it's such a large frame. So for your project, you might want to use something smaller if you do decide to frame it. So the reason I chose to frame is because I want to make it easier for myself just to run the circuits that I want to move over and new circuits as I see the need for them. And framing it just makes it super easy. I'm gonna just drill some holes in the top of this frame to the side of the panel, run them down the side here and up, and also through the sides here. And that's gonna just make it so much easier for me rather than possibly considering having this panel outside of a frame and just doing a bunch of conduit every time I add a circuit. Pain in the ass. So after doing some research, it looks like for 200 amp sub panel, it's recommended to use 3/0 wires, and those wires are also listed to handle more than 200 amps. So for my installation, I want to kind of go overboard whenever I can, since I am planning to add a lot of circuits on this and possibly some solar in the future. So for 200 amp, we're gonna have to have two 3/0 wires going through from the two loads. So it'll be two hot 3/0 wires, one neutral 3/0 wire, which will go in here, and then for the ground, we're actually able to use a smaller wire. I read that 6 gauge might be acceptable, but I'm gonna make that a little larger just to be on the safe side, and I'm gonna go with a 4 gauge wire. And to make that happen, in a sub panel, we have to keep the neutral and the ground separate, as I've heard mentioned in every video I've watched. So I'm gonna add a little bar here for the ground, and which will also ground the actual panel box itself. So I do plan to get this inspected, so I am following any NEC recommendations I can find, which is what Phoenix goes by. But yes, at the end of this, I will get an inspector. Having said that, I do plan to use a 2-inch PVC conduit, schedule 40. So what I plan to do is run the conduit from the top section of this panel, drill around a 2-inch hole straight through my 2x4s that I use to frame, and then run the conduit all the way through my crawl space, which is about maybe 20 or 30 feet to the main panel outside, and then the conduit will run all the way to the main panel. So one thing I did want to mention, which I've also heard a bunch of times, is that because I am adding the sub panel in the same structure as my main panel, I can use the ground from my main panel. But if you were, for example, adding a sub panel to a detached garage, at that point you're going to have a separate grounding rod and create the proper grounding, and you won't be able to reuse the grounding from your main panel. Okay, let's have a quick look at my existing main panel just so you have an idea to compare to yours. So I installed this main panel about 10 years ago, and it was one of my earlier electrical projects, so I made a bit of a bad decision by not picking the larger sub panel. And then after that, I installed a bunch of extra circuits, including like I installed a stove, a bunch of lighting, and a bunch of new outlets. As you can see, it's looking really messy with all the conduit running through it, and it just takes a lot of time running all this conduit. So that's where a lot of the motivation behind this project was just to clean this up. And my plan is to get rid of a lot of these extra conduits and move over some of the circuits into the new sub panel. Just pop this open to show you how this looks real quick. This is a live sub panel, and I just want to remind you to take caution when you work with live stuff, and it can be dangerous, so do it at your own risk. So here's a little closer look at my existing sub panel, and yeah, as you can see, it's pretty full. There's a few slots, but it's largely full, and nowhere near enough of the space I'm going to require for my future projects. So the way that we're going to tap into this panel and use 2000 watts is this Square D 2000 watt breaker that's intended for this purpose. And I will include all the links to all these products in the description. Basically, this takes a bunch of these slots, so I'm gonna have to remove some before I attach it, and then yeah, we're gonna install the two hots on this side, and it also comes with a separate lug for the neutral, so I'll have to tap that into the neutral, and the ground will just tap into one of the grounds. And yeah, on the main panel, as you can see, I have the ground and neutral connected. But on the sub panel, another reminder, you will have to have the ground and the neutral separate. Okay, so that's the quick intro. Let me close this up. This should give you an idea if this video might be appropriate for what you're trying to do. If you want to have a lower amperage sub panel, it should still be a similar installation, maybe a little bit easier. But yeah, this is just a kickoff video, and I'm gonna step by step go through the rest of the process that's remaining. And next, I plan to drill some holes for the 2-inch conduit and start running it through my crawl space. And then I'm going to go from there. All right, see you soon. Hi. So to get started, for completeness, first I want to talk about how I framed the structure that's going to house my sub panel. So I do have a bit of experience with framing. I did some work framing on my house, and I'll just go over some of the basic tools and stuff I used, but I'm not going to go into too much detail since it's already up here standing. So to start framing, the first thing I did, well, I kind of decided where I wanted my sub panel to be, how much space I would need. As I mentioned before, I decided to go with the larger framing because I will most likely do some solar work in the future, and I want to have another sub panel here for my solar load. So it's the perfect size for that. And again, this is not load bearing, so I'm not too worried about how strong it will be. It's more for aesthetics and just to you know, protect everyone from the wires that'll be running, mainly my daughter, that'll be running in here, and also to pass inspection. Okay, so a quick rundown. So to get started, I picked this space. I had an idea that the beams in the roof are going to be about 16 inches apart, and yeah, I picked a space that'll house what I needed, which in this case would be 2 of these bigger panels with enough space to run wires in between. So to get started, I got one of these stud finders. I found my starting stud, my starting beam up there, and that's what I worked on first, having that top piece attached. I also used my stud finder to find the other beams I would need to attach this top piece of wood, and that's how I started. And these are what I use is just standard 2x4s, which matches up with the most of indoor panel standard indoor panels that you will find. So next, I started working on this bottom portion. Since standard wood is 8 feet long, and I already had some of that, I decided just to use a few pieces of wood on the bottom there. Ended up being 4 pieces of wood in order to match up with the height of an 8-foot 2x4. So I measured from the side of the wall, make sure it's about even, the same width piece of wood, and I put 4 of these down here to get started. And I did have to drill into my concrete. I made a couple of holes just to hold the structure in place in case it gets a hit and so it doesn't move anywhere. It's nice and solid. And once, you know, I used a couple of anchors, concrete anchors, some screws. I'm not going to go into every detail, but that's the gist of it. And for most of the rest of the connections from my 2x4s, I use this 3-inch decking, these screws, which have a nice star drive, so you can use one of your driving drills in it without stripping the screw, which just speeds things up a little bit. And a quick recommendation: when you are drilling into using these screws in your 2x4s, I recommend drilling a small pilot hole first where it's going to go, just to basically get rid of any chance of splitting your wood, which did happen to me before I started doing that for my first one. So yeah, after I had these bottom pieces of wood, then I got my 8-foot piece of wood. These were slightly too tall, so I had to use a saw to length and cut them slightly. Then I got them in there. I used a leveler to make sure they're nice and level, and that's how I started with this one. Then the second one I put it in there just because the first one was a little crooked, and I also wanted to have some more strength to my structure here. And I also had in mind if I was going to put some drywall here, I kind of wanted to have a little more space than just one beam in order to add the drywall to finish this off in the future at some point. Since I don't really like cutting such 1.5 inch pieces of drywall, if that makes any sense. And of course, I just added another piece there to close it off, and I might end up adding another 2x4 in here before I connect my sub panel. Okay, so once I had this structure, I decided to get my sub panel hung up here, and to do that, I basically used one of these vice grip things by the Vault. These are great to really help hold stuff like this up. And once I had it hung up, I got a little permanent marker to put 2 dots in this place, and then I drilled my couple of holes into the block. Just take this off to show you. And so I just used these hex head concrete screws. And another reminder is I will be posting all of the links I have had to buy for this stuff, and I'll try to be complete and post every tool that I did use in this whole process. And this is great also because it comes with its own little drill bit, which is the right size for these screws, and they worked out well. So once I had the screws in place, I did want to use the screws because, again, I don't want to put too much weight on this structure, even though it should be able to handle it. I just wanted to have the structure be more, for running the wires and not depend on it, since it's easy enough to add a couple of screws in here. So once those screws were there, got my panel, hung it back up. Luckily, I measured correctly, and it fit correctly, just like that. Okay, so now we have the sub panel there, and my next plan is to get a hole cut above the panel for the main breaker wires, which will be feeding this panel, and I'm gonna use a 2-inch conduit, which is going to connect with this little male connector here and screw into my conduit to make it nice and neat. So the first step, which I actually already did, I remember, was getting something bright with a pencil or permanent marker. Get a ladder, and then measuring. Now let's get something that I did actually use. There's a ruler and this leveler. Let's pretend that's what I used. So I figured out basically the center of the hole here, and I measured off, from vertically and horizontally, and I just made a line and basically found the middle of where I will be starting my my drilling for the hole into my crawl space. And if you're really smart, which actually I didn't do for this scenario, I would investigate what's above here. But it's kind of tough to figure out often how to do that without making a hole. So I decided to take the tiny bit of a risk. I figure whatever's above this I can move around, and I did have a hole, not too far from it, from this one. So I'm pretty sure I should have a pretty clear spot after cutting here. But my plan is to drill a small hole all the way to my crawl space, go above investigate and go from there. And once you have a small hole, then you'll have a starter for the larger hole saw you will need to cut out the space for the 2-inch conduit. Okay, let's drill the hole for our 2-inch electrical PVC conduit. So I've taken down the breaker for now, taken down the sub panel because I don't want to get it dirty and clean it later. And I'm gonna drill into the marked center point of where I estimated that that the panel would connect with a straight conduit. And if I figure I measured a couple of times, I figure if it's not perfect, it's kind of hard to get the perfect point. If it's not perfect, I'll expand the hole a little bit and then I'll just patch it up later. Which again, I'm not worried about this being a structural support. So I can take away more than the recommended amount if it were a structural 2x4. Okay, let's see, huh? Is this about it? Okay, there we go. Okay, I think that was far enough. Let me try to find something so I can stick through there to see and make sure that it's the hole was made. I found this little garden stake, so I'm gonna make it straight and stuff it in there. See if it pops through. Safety first. And that is not small enough. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So it is going through. Not show any butt cracks. Okay. Okay. That's good. Get in there a bit farther. But definitely went through farther than what I drilled. So I'm pretty sure that the hole went through. All right, looks good. So now I'm going to go to my crawl space and try to find, something I stuffed through there to make sure that it's actually a good place to make a hole, or I might have to move some stuff around. All right. All right, I am in my crawl space, which is almost closer to an attic, to be honest. I'm really lucky to have such a generous crawl space here. I can walk around just hunching over. So I'm gonna try to follow along and see if I find something sticking through where I expected, and it looks like this is it. Let's dig under here. So there's gonna be a lot of there's a little wire here. Okay, it's nothing. A lot of insulation. It's pretty messy up here. Every attic is different, but I hope you have some insulation in yours. If not, definitely get some. Even though it makes this kind of stuff much harder, you don't want to be paying for heating or cooling and have it all be wasted. see if there's anything getting in the way. And it looks pretty good. So I should be safe to drill my hole for that big 2-inch PVC. And no obstructions that I can see. There is some electrical wiring pretty close by, so I'll have to keep an eye on that. But it's in its little Romex wiring, so it's all looks up to code. This looks like a little phone line or something, which I don't even use anymore. Alright, let's move on to cutting the hole. Alright, let's create the hole for our PVC 2-inch PVC piping. So I got this little drill bit set, and it turned out that 2.5 inches is the right size to get around this 2-inch PVC. Let me show you that real quick. So yeah, it's just about the right size, and slightly bigger is also okay. So yeah, I'm gonna start the drilling. Okay, we can pull out our metal little stick, and I ended up switching the sticks to this little lawn flag metal stick, since it was thinner and it was higher than my insulation. So if you have one of these, this is what I would use. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, this is kind of a bit of a cheap drill bit, so it's not going great, but let's see how it goes. Alright, there's my hole. It's looking good. I put up my sub panel for a little bit. I wanted to measure the distance between the top crawl space and my sub panel, so it's about a 1.5 feet. And then I'm gonna add another 2 feet to my first little PVC cut. So I'm gonna cut about 3.5, just so I have a lot of space to decide how I want to run my PVC in my crawl space. So there's a lot of ways to make this cut. You can use a little hacksaw, you can use some kind of table saw, different saws. But I was able to find this pipe cutter tool in my old tools, so I decided to use it. This one can also be used for metal pipes, but I figured it might be a nice clean cut and it's quiet, and you just kind of get it on there, crank it down, and you make it tighter and tighter. Go around, make it tighter. Go around, and it just kind of has a blade that cuts through both metal and PVC pipe. See how well it does. It's my first time trying it on this kind of pipe, but if it can cut metal, then it can definitely go through this guy. Let's see how practical it is. Seems to be looking pretty good so far. This one is also schedule 40, so it's not too thick. So it should be getting close to being done. Okay, we should be right around the corner. There it goes. Alright, well, it was a bit more labor than I expected, but we have a nice clean cut. And before I connect anything, I'm going to take a knife and cut out the bottom, but again, this is probably not my final length, since I'm going to cut this again in my crawl space, depending on what height I determine it should be for me to do the rest of my runs. Okay, let's try attaching our sub panel and the first PVC pipe, making sure it all fits together. My fingers crossed. Alright, so first I attach the little male connection. Let's get this pipe through our ceiling. That fits, that's good. Okay, I'm kind of tall, so you might need a ladder for this, but attach it. Cross your fingers or your toes, and it looks great. Not too much wiggle. Have to use a little, a bit of caulk or something at the end to close up that hole. But yeah, it's a good start. So next, I think I'm gonna go to the crawl space, continue making the fittings without actually gluing it yet, and run it all the way to the panel however I can. And of course, trying to keep it as straight as possible to make feeding the wires easier. But honestly, these wires are so huge, 3/0 wires, I'll most likely just take everything apart and run the wires little by little instead of trying to like pull them through or anything, because they're just too big and too non-bendy. Okay, let's move on. So for completeness, I took one of these 2-inch lock nuts, and I got it on top of the male connector. And nothing is glued yet, but I just put it on there to hold it in place. A little bit, not too tight. Okay, let's move on. All right, so progressing with the sub panel installation. So I needed to figure out how to get my the sub-panel conduit and how to where to put it inside my main panel. So since my panel is so crowded, it turned out that the best possible position is this area right here, which I marked off, and I'm going to drill this towards the end when I'm closer to hooking up my conduit, so as not to leave it exposed to the elements. So after I cut this hole, I'm going to use one of these housings, which I will also add the link to in my installation. And I'm going to connect it up with a male connector, and then do a similar connection as I did into my sub panel using a little lock nut. It looks something like this. It is super tight right now, so I'm gonna have to, I think, remove this this conduit right here, which actually connects to my stove, which is fine because I was planning to move that into my sub panel, but I'll have to kind of coordinate and maybe not have a stove for a day or so. So this connector is gonna go straight up, and I already created a little hole where another one of these connectors, or what do you call these? I forgot what you called them. But another one of these is gonna go straight here into the hole, and it's gonna go straight down with a piece of conduit into the second connector. So that's currently my plan. I do already have this hole drilled, and you're gonna want to use a similar method where you just drill a small hole, put a metal piece through, check the other side, make sure there's clearance for your bigger hole. So I did use the same size hole size I did for my sub panel, and since this housing is actually a little bit wider and I do want to get the full housing inside the hole, I'm gonna have to expand that hole a little bit, and I'm gonna show you quickly a method that I used to do that. Or maybe I'll talk about it, and I don't think I'll be able to get a good camera angle up here. So basically I'll just get a pencil, I'll circle around. You know, there shouldn't be much difference between this hole and the housing hole. And then I'm gonna use my drill with a nice big drill bit, and I'm gonna you know, just move around the circle, the existing hole, until I get to where my pencil mark is, or maybe a little bit before. So let me give that a try. So there's the little outline I made with my pencil, and I'm gonna take my big drill bit and go in a circle. It's gonna take a little while, so I'm gonna cut out and just show you the result and show you how long it took. Alright, so that was a little harder than I actually expected. I think this wood is pretty hard. It's an old house, and yeah, they used a really hard wood on this thing. So in all honesty, I did it for about 10 minutes, got frustrated. Whoops. And I ended up just using one of these for half a minute to get it done around in the corners, since it was starting to create like a bit of holing in some of the edges. And yeah, so overall it took me like 15 minutes. If you have one of these, definitely recommend it, but I did see the end in sight, and if you don't have one of these, you could probably get like a box cutter or something and like cut away a little bit as well. But yeah, it worked out. And how did I drop this thing? Let's see if make sure it fits. It's fairly snug fit, which is actually good to help hold it in place. And then
Then yeah, next I'm gonna connect all of the stuff up inside the crawl space. Make sure to get the right cut length for this connection, and then just connect everything without using glue to start with, so I can get my measurements in order to order this the 3/0 wire, which gets really pricey. I want to make sure I have the correct measurements. Okay, so I've loosely attached the connector on top, and I attached the connector to where it's going to go into my main panel. And I just want to measure a length so I can cut some of the conduit and try to get this stuff mounted already a little bit. Alright, so I'm just going to measure to the top of the opening of the connectors. Then I'm going to add an inch for each connector, since I wanted to go about an inch inside the connector. So this is going to be around, looks like around 36 3/4. And I'm going to add 2 inches, so it's going to be 38 3/4. So I just wanted to mention another method to cut these pipes. My pipe cutter wasn't quite cooperating, so I decided to bust out my miter saw. And you know, this is similar to cutting 2x4s. Just get it on there, make sure it's straight, and it does the cuts nice and quick and clean. There's the progress, looking good. Looks like it's right where I want it to be. Now I'm just gonna have to cut a 2-inch little piece out and get the male connector glued in. And on top, I'll get I think a foot length to get the connector ready for my the conduit running in my crawl space. All right, let me show you the 2-inch cut. So you can see it live in action. Got it lined up, got my little mark there. Checking that the saw goes where I expect. Nice and clean. I decided to put a little hole and a little wood screw in here to hold in place this whole piece as I work on the other side, and I might be pushing against it a little bit to get it fit in place. So to mention one tip I learned from the pros is that when you're cutting this conduit pipe, make sure to run a knife or something across the middle. So kind of like, it's so hard to get the angle here. Just like this. And around the corners all the way around to make sure there's no sharp edges, because you don't want sharp edges in there in case you're running cable, and you don't want your wires to get all scratched up. Alright, so at this point I have skipped ahead and finished my installation, but I wanted to walk through all of the pieces to complete this video. Alright, so first let's look at the conduit. So the conduit starts at the sub panel. We have here a male connector. Here we have a female connector, keeping it together in place neatly. And then we have our 2-inch straight conduit going up into the crawl space. And let's go check that out. For crawl space, make sure you have your gear. You have, most importantly, a breathing mask, a light, and some gloves. All right, here we are in our crawl space. There's our conduit. So we have the conduit coming straight up. Then I have right away a 90-degree bend. Then we have the conduit, a 10-foot conduit going straight there. Let's follow it along. I used a little bit of support where I found needed. Then it uses a coupling here, just for a short piece. This was definitely a huge pain trying to get this connected in this dusty crawl space. So go straight again. Then we do a little 45-degree angle turn and some straight pipe to go outside. Alright, let's go take a look at what's next. Alright, so straight out of our crawl space, we go into this conduit body that does a 90-degree turn. And as you can see there, I have a little bit of gap there. I'm going to add some, a little bit of caulk at some point to fill those in. I'll show you how this service entrance conduit body is designed. Let me pop this off. Take the screws out preemptively. So as you can see, these wires, they're massive, the 3/0 service wires and the 4-gauge ground wire. So doing this bend in a standard conduit body is very, very difficult. Thereby, I was able to find these on Amazon, 25 bucks, by Southwire, and I will be listing all of the links to everything I used in this video in the description. So as you can see, this just allows you to really easily fish the tape through this part and then bend it 90 degrees at this section, and this little piece it comes off and it can be slid onto the end of your wire from this side. I'll probably do a separate video just on this, since it actually helped to save my installation. Alright, let's get that back on. Alright, so after this first conduit body, we just have the standard 2-inch straight pipe. We have a little connector here attached to the wall. And then we have another one of these same conduit bodies, since I needed to do that 90-degree turn again into my main panel. Let's check that out. So after this section, we have another male adapter, and then I just use a conduit 2-inch lock nut on this side, since I had very limited space to turn my large cables. So let's talk about these large cables and how I was able to fish them through all these different bends and stuff. So this is probably, I think, the hardest part of this installation was just fishing these massive cables, the 3/0 gauge cables and a 4-inch ground cable. I think some places, said that 2/0 would have been adequate, but I wanted to make sure to over-engineer this installation. So what I did was, initially I fed the cables into this side. I had a fish tape that I ran from the other side. I guess let me show you that fish tape real quick. Alright, so I picked up this fiberglass fish tape. I think it was around 80 bucks. But I decided to get it since I am planning a lot of extra electrical projects in the near future. So I took the fish tape, stuck it in from this side, pushed it out all the way until it came out from the other side. Then I tied up this piece to the large wire. I am not going to go into those details, but I basically used electrical tape, and I bent one of the aluminum, the copper pieces from the large 3/0 wires. Alright, so I had the fish tape sticking out straight from here, and yeah, this conduit body was already in place with the cover off. And the fish tape was sticking out this way, and then I set up the large ladder on this side with the massive and heavy cables. I needed about 30 feet of cable to feed into here. So I pulled the fish tape until I had the wire against this area, and then I pushed the wire in a little bit, and that fiberglass fish tape just kind of comes out the other side as far as I was able to push it. but I do a 45-degree bend right there, so then I had to pull. And I did come across some issues with the pulling, so I actually ended up adding some wire lubricant. Let me show you that real quick. Klein Tools wire lubricant that I decided to use, and it did help, I think, move things along a little bit better with this, really frustrating and difficult pull. So once I had this on there, I stuck the wires back in. I pushed from this side and pulled from the other side, bit by bit. I didn't have a helper, so I did it by myself, but ideally you would have somebody pushing on this side and somebody pulling the fish stay from the other side. Alright, so once I got the wires to come out on this side, I attached, first I attached this ground wire to my grounding installation right here, and I attached an extra small grounding installation on top of this, just to be able to fit the 4-gauge wire. So this side also has a grounding installation, and they are linked by the actual sub-panel body itself. I've seen some people use an extra wire here. I am considering that, but I've read that it is not necessary, so it's not in place currently. So then I went ahead and I connected my large wires. There's 2 wires, one for neutral with the white wire and 2 for hot. Then I put on these little main wire lug protectors that came with the sub panel. So once I had these wires slid in, I used a torque wrench with, I think, a 3/8 bit, and I torqued it to the recommended 250. But you always double check the torque recommendations on your panel, which are, for this one, they're on the side right here. Okay, let's put this back on. And this just helps, plastic helps protect from accidentally touching the main lug hot wires. All right, let's go check out the other side. So this side was probably the biggest pain to actually attach. Here's our 200 amp breaker. I had to install a grounding, a neutral wire kit, which came with this breaker. And again, all of the links, so everything I bought, I will try to add to the description. Please let me know if I'm missing anything. So initially, the first thing I did was I connected the neutral wire to here, and I torqued it to 250 as was recommended. Then I slid it into the grounding bar, and I torqued the little screws to 35. But again, always double check everything that you're installing, and yeah, make sure you torque it to the recommended, and if not, then just make it nice and tight, but not too tight. So for sure, try to get a torque wrench if you can. Okay, then I already had a little ground installation, so I attached it on the bottom here, and that fit the 4-gauge wire really nicely. Okay, from then on, I slid the 2 hot wires into my little breaker here, 200 amp breaker, and I torqued it. I actually don't recall what the recommended torque was, but yeah, double check the manual for that. So yeah, that was my installation. Next, I'm gonna move over some of these breakers into my new panel, since it's quite a mess out here. I don't think I'm gonna post videos on that, since that's fairly simple. And I do plan to have some extra, pieces to continue through this sub-panel installation. I plan to add solar, so I'm gonna have a new separate panel just for solar, and this the sub-panel will be feeding the inverter as grid backups. If you're interested in electrical or other DIY projects I might partake in, please subscribe. Leave some comments. I'm just starting this channel, but I'm gonna call it DIY Powell, which is my name, Powell. And yeah, I'm excited to create some content and document all of the different DIY projects that I will be working on going forward. Hope you enjoyed this video and have a good one. And the last piece of this installation is going to be hanging up your sub panel cover. That's real easy to do. They provide you with 6 screws. I would start with the 2 on top when you're holding it up, and then you're going to want to knock out all of the spaces for the sub panels that you used. Make sure to label your panel. I'm going to be working on this for some time, so I'm not going to include that in this video, but I just wanted to mention it for completeness. I forgot one little thing. You can search this on YouTube for more details, but I just wanted to include a sub panel multimeter test. So here's my multimeter set to 2 volts, 200 on my multimeter. It's a pretty old one. We're gonna first test the ground. So ground too hot. We get 120 volts. Let's test the other ground bar. Ground too hot. Still 120. Let's test the neutral. Hot to neutral. 120. So that's the basic test to make sure that you're getting the 120 volts that you expect. All right, that's it. Later.